Welcome to Back Away Slowly, a series that walks with you through mysterious places, ominous folktales, strange creatures, and so on, before taking a deeper look at what these stories can tell us about humankind. Episodes are available in a video format on Patreon. The videos include photos, footage of my own visits to these locations, illustrations, animations, and more. Sources, social links, the shop, and more are available at backawayslowlypodcast.com. A warning that serious themes and language are used, so viewing discretion is advised. Today we'll cover a far more organized type of nefarious crime, going from the brutal violence of one or two men to the domination of an entire syndicate for years. It's looking back into the days when Newport, Kentucky was the original Vegas. Let's cover the Cleveland mob in northern Kentucky. Our story picks back up in 1915, when John and Julia Popp purchased the property that would become Bobby Mackey's. They opened the Bluegrass Inn, which was used as a home, saloon, and bowling alley. John Popp was then Finchtown's resident bad boy, frequently being arrested for theft or other petty crimes. This criminal history was recorded as early as 1893, when he was indicted via grand jury for illegal gambling as well as selling liquor on Sundays. Jumping to April 1920, federal prohibition agents raided the Bluegrass Inn, where they arrested John Popp for trafficking intoxicants. They also seized wine, 5 barrels of rock and rye, bottles of Kimmel, and Italian wines and bitters. By March 1922, illegal gambling in liquor was so common in Newport that Colonel H. H. Denhart created barracks for agents, including officers' quarters, meeting rooms, mess halls, and bunks, in order to provide for a task force to crack down on all of the vices infesting the city. John Popp was again arrested for violating the Volstead Act, which was the possession of whiskey and wine. Later that year in November, agents made a surprise visit to John Popp's on a Tuesday afternoon. The Bluegrass Inn had long been known to possess illegal slot machines and alcohol, but this time Popp took a rebellious stance against the agents. He was cited for possessing moonshine and was ordered to appear before Covington's commissioner on the charge of violating the Volstead Act. Again. By now you may be wondering how this cycle was able to repeat itself so frequently, with seemingly little effect on John Popp. You see, at this time, most violators just needed to pay a fine, and violators were so common that the system simply couldn't enforce more serious punishments. In fact, the areas of Newport, Covington, and Cincinnati had so many violations that courts began to offer bargain days, where defendants could go in and plead guilty for a lighter fine. It was simply a smarter option for John Popp to pay these lighter fines and later rake in far more income by selling illegal liquor. This cycle worked well until Congress adopted the Jones 5 and 10 law in 1929. This made the penalty for first-time violators to be 5 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, or sometimes both. In June, John Popp tried to circumvent the new law by decreasing his illegal alcohol sales while quietly increasing his slot machines, but he was still indicted with a large fine. To combat this turn of events, Popp employed Albert Masterson, nicknamed Red, at the inn. With Masterson's organized crime dealings going on at the inn, any legal heat was far more focused on Masterson than on Popp's relatively small-time illegal activities. But Popp's business was lucrative enough that it didn't go unnoticed by other criminals in the area. On Friday, September 4th, 1930, a burglar alarm went off at 3:30 a.m. Mr. and Mrs. Popp came downstairs in time to see a burglar leaving out of a window that he'd broken in order to gain entry. Mrs. Popp had grabbed a revolver from a dresser on the way to confront the intruder. She fired at the burglar 3 times, or at least she tried to. It turns out that their functioning revolver was still under John Popp's pillow, and she had instead picked up one with a broken trigger. In the next few years, the Bluegrass Inn would see an odd collection of unfortunate events. On Thanksgiving of 1930, only 2 months after the burglary, an overheated furnace started a fire in the Bluegrass Inn's first-floor hallway, quickly spreading to the second floor. The damage totaled at $1,500, which is approximately $27,000 today, prompting John Popp to then insure the building and begin repairs. 3 years later in July, 2 carpenters waterproofing the outside of the inn fell 20 feet when their scaffolding collapsed. One man only suffered a sprained ankle, but 60-year-old John Beating suffered massive internal bleeding and died at St. Elizabeth Hospital. March 1st, 1937, a 2-story building on Licking Pike caught fire, the blaze threatening 5 nearby buildings, including the Bluegrass Inn. The fire had started in a room over a cafe that John Popp rented out. By the end of the fire, the roof collapsed with only the brick walls remaining. The total damage to the Bluegrass Inn was $4,000, which is approximately $84,000 today. And finally, in November of 1941, the reopened cafe was broken into via a basement window, and a whopping 375 packs of cigarettes and a few other items were stolen. This last blow seemed to be the last straw for John Popp, as he died soon after and Julia Popp sold the troublesome property. The building was purchased and transformed into the Beacon Inn, operating as a casino. By the 1940s, it was purchased by Buck Brady and was made into a club. But before we get to that, we need to review what the mob scene was like, as it was incredibly active across Ohio. Let's go back to discuss a man named George Remus. George Remus was a pharmacist who created fake pharmaceutical companies so that he could legally buy alcohol for medicinal properties. He then distilled and sold this alcohol for a large profit, earning the name King of the Bootleggers. By the time he was finally arrested in 1922, he had an estimated worth of over $70 million. This empire established, quote, formalized corruption in Newport. Many of the men involved in this operation went on to become major players in the gambling scene. Some of these men became part of the Cleveland Four, which was a branch of the Cleveland mob. Another descendant of this dynasty was Ernest Buck Brady, who opened casinos and played major roles in multiple shootings and mob takeovers. Now, before Buck Brady purchased the Beacon Inn, another associate of George Remus named Peter Schmidt bought a club in Southgate, Kentucky, just 3 miles south of Newport, and named it Beverly Hills Club. The Cleveland Four, who had spread their influence through Newport, noticed that the Beverly Hills Club's success was drawing patrons away from the Cleveland Syndicate's businesses. Sam Tucker, of the Cleveland Four, led a takeover of the Beverly Hills Club via vandalism. Though the club owner attempted to resist the mob's attacks, he was forced to concede after the club was set on fire, which killed a child, and was later robbed under submachine gunfire. Finally, the club was sold to Sam Tucker and the Cleveland Four in 1940. Despite the chaos occurring at the Beverly Hills Club, Buck Brady saw this as the perfect time to take some of the Prohibition-era profits for himself, so he purchased the Beacon Inn. Since the Beacon Inn sat just outside of Newport, Brady hoped that it would save him from police raids as well as from the attention of the Cleveland Four or any other mob syndicate. For a time, the Primrose did great business under Brady's leadership as a club and casino. However, there was certainly more going on under the surface. Buck Brady might be attempting to go unnoticed by the mob, but he was an expert at bootlegging, and that was a difficult habit to leave behind, and word of this quietly got around. Buck Brady installed a trapdoor in the men's restroom. Alcohol would be brought on a barge, which loitered on the Licking River near the building. The alcohol would then be smuggled through the old distillery tunnel and into the club. The trapdoor would then be utilized to take the goods to the clientele. Despite this level of organization, the Primrose wasn't a stranger to brutality. When I toured the location, our guide told us that they have newspaper clippings from when the Primrose first opened. 2 men got into an argument, then into a scuffle, and then one man shoved the other. The falling man cracked his head on a radiator and died. Even though there were occasional incidents such as this, it was the establishment's success that would actually instigate another level of violence. The Primrose did such good business that it wouldn't be long before it competed too closely to the Beverly Hills Club. The Cleveland Four put Albert "Red" Masterson to the task of forcing Buck Brady out of the Primrose. What they didn't expect was for Brady to take an active role in this fight. On August 5th, 1946, Buck Brady waited outside of the Merchants Club with a shotgun, waiting for the club owner, Red Masterson, to emerge. As Masterson was getting into his car, Brady shot him, but Masterson survived. Brady was later found and taken into custody by the police. George Remus, the king of the bootleggers, himself testified as a character witness on Brady's behalf. In a move of mob politics, Masterson, despite knowing exactly who had attacked him, refused to identify the shooter. When released, Brady faced an ultimatum from the Cleveland Four: leave or die. With no other option, Buck Brady retired to Florida until 1965. At 84, he was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Brady sold the Primrose for $100,000, which was then handed off to Dave Whitfield, who ran the club on behalf of the Cleveland Four. The mob got to work transforming the Primrose into the Latin Quarter. The new arrangement involved an upscale restaurant and bar, a casino, and a secret room. They were able to secure larger performers such as Nat King Cole and Duke Ellington. Other acts included a glamorous, glitzy chorus line of beautiful girls, similar to what many imagine when they think of Vegas, which is fitting as this kind of mob activity would eventually shift its attention to Vegas in the near future. Despite the club masquerading as simply a source of quality entertainment and dining, it was still a business run by the mob. They quickly utilized the trapdoor and staircase that Buck Brady had created, using it to warn the patrons of incoming police raids. These tip-offs allowed enough time to prepare so that when the police arrived, all that they would find was people mingling and watching the live shows. While day-to-day patrons came and went from the club, the basement is where the real business was conducted. The basement is enormous, and different pockets of it show the face of different eras. A line of small dressing rooms were erected for the dancers, but a few now crumbling rooms branch off into the darkness, unsafe to venture into. It's those rooms in which the mob would carry out interrogations. Even if you weren't in trouble for crossing the mob in a large way, cheaters caught upstairs in the casino were also brought into the basement to be beaten, or worse. Shootings and hangings were apparently quite common in the basement. When asked about these stories, a man who frequented the club said, "Oh sure, cheaters would take away the profits from the business, you see. Cheaters were dealt with quickly. Nobody wanted to see their money being taken away by some slick trickster. There was definitely violence involved, but the Latin Quarter wasn't the only place where this happened." A bold statement for sure, but when the same man was asked about murders in the basement, he got what was described as a funny look before denying that there were ever any murders. Have you heard of the Newport nightgown? Also known as the Newport nightcap, the mob would kill a victim, place their body in a barrel, and submerge them in concrete. After it hardened, they would dispose of the evidence in the nearby river. One source states, quote, "According to some local historians, if the bottom of the rivers were dredged today, many of these concrete crypts would be found." A barge captain who was active during the running of the Latin Quarter talked about his own experiences. While he had initially done business in the smuggling of alcohol, when the mob asks you to do a little something more, you can't exactly say no. In this captain's case, he would meet men at the distillery drainage tunnel as it opened to the Licking River. One night, he was met by the men, as well as two 55-gallon drums filled with concrete. He was instructed to, quote, "Take the drums down one of the rivers far from the club and dump them, and don't ask questions." The men giving him the barrels didn't care where the barrels went, just that they were gone. This happened a few times, and the captain was sure that there were bodies in them. But as mentioned before, how do you refuse the mob? The captain says that he dumped these barrels at Hebron, Kentucky, near where the Anderson Ferry operates. It was also noted that this level of honesty is rare, as, quote, even those in their 80s and 90s refuse to speak about what happened, either because they still fear for their lives or because they wish to forget. Bullet holes can still be found in the basement, as can the remaining ruins of John Pop's house. The trapdoor stairs lead into this last remaining room of the Pop house, but it also houses the tunnel and the portal to hell. It might also surprise you to hear that this room was also where children were kept. This was actually for their safety. Our guide noted that it was where all of the dancers' children were watched over while their mothers were working. They kept toys downstairs for these kids, and having them in one room made it easy to keep an eye on them. With all of the more intimate practices of the club going on, sometimes men would get it into their heads that they were owed the attention of a dancer. The children were kept in the heart of the basement to prevent any of them being used as a hostage against their mother. This more positive intent may have been true, but as I stood in the dusty, crumbling room, I couldn't help but think of these children, playing in one room in a basement all day, perhaps hearing the pleading coming from the latest victim of mob interrogation being done mere feet away. In 1961, the Committee of 500 shut down the Latin Quarter. Though it would later reopen, it would be without gambling or prostitution, since by this point, most major players had moved their business to Vegas. The Latin Quarter wouldn't last much longer, closing for good in the mid-1970s. The building had a brief moment of peace as a bingo parlor in the 60s, but the mid-70s saw the opening of the Hard Rock Cafe, with no relation to the restaurant chain. This also quickly attracted violence, as the cafe was included in the stomping grounds of two rival biker gangs, the Iron Horse Motorcycle Club and the Seventh Sons. The cafe earned the nickname the Bloody Bucket due to the amount of horrific fights and fatalities due to the gang's rivalry. One evening, an employee named Carl Lawson was cleaning up the cafe when he saw a young woman. She giggled before telling Lawson that she was waiting for Robert Randall to come back for her. She refused to leave until this Robert Randall returned. Lawson turned to phone the cops, but when he looked back at the woman, she was gone. When Lawson checked the doors, he found them all still locked. In November of 1977, 20-year-old Richie Ronnies was shot in front of the club. He would die in 1978 of those injuries. In the same January, Dan Groh was shot in the neck with a shotgun and killed outside of the cafe. This was the last straw, and Police Chief Robert Schindler closed the cafe as a public nuisance. Though the mob days were over, it wouldn't be long before a face from the old Latin Quarter days would return to the club to give it new life. After the Hard Rock Cafe closed, a man named Bobby Mackey visited the building. Mackey had been one of the musicians that had played at the Latin Quarter for years, and he felt a strong connection with the place. Despite his pregnant wife, Janet, having a very uneasy feeling whenever she visited the building, he purchased it. An ex-Hard Rock Cafe employee named Carl Lawson asked Mackey if he could stay, and so he was hired on as a handyman. According to Janet and Carl, the supernatural forces manifested hard and fast. While looking for Carl in the old casino room, Janet was engulfed in a wave of fear. A ladder began to walk itself in her direction. Frozen in shock and terror, she heard a whisper directly in her ear, "Get out." Carl walked into the room, took stock of the bizarre situation, and pulled Janet away before the ladder could fall on her. Despite his wife and employee forcefully recounting this incident to him, Bobby rejected their story as he didn't want anything to jeopardize his fledgling business. While renovating the kitchen, Carl could hear noises in the vents coming from the basement. At one point, Janet was grabbed around the waist in the kitchen. When she screamed, Carl again came to her rescue. Laughter echoed around the kitchen, pots and pans flying around the room. Right before opening, a fire destroyed the L-shaped south wing, which had contained living quarters for maids and porters. Now, if you remember back to the Pearl Bryan part of our story, I mentioned that the Ghost Adventures crew interviewed author Douglas Hensley. Hensley claimed that the bloodhounds had led police directly to the distillery, which we know is not true. This same author, in his book, reported that Carl Lawson believed that the fire was started by the ghost of Alonzo Walling. For multiple reasons that we covered more extensively in the Pearl Bryan section, I'm not very inclined to believe Hensley's recounting. Despite the odd occurrences and the mysterious fire, Bobby Mackey's opened in 1978. But this wouldn't settle the negative forces repeatedly swirling around the place. Janet was cleaning the upstairs area when she was thrown to the floor by an unseen force. She scrambled to the doorway and stairs, but she was lifted and pushed up the stairs. This source specifically notes that she fell up the stairs as opposed to multiple mistaken retellings. The specter roared at her to get out, which she did. The shock of this incident sent Janet into premature labor, and she gave birth the following morning at 8:30 a.m. After so many terrifying incidents, Carl drove to St. John's Church. He was so desperate that he pulled an empty soda bottle out from under his seat and filled it with holy water. Upon returning to the club, he sprinkled the water around the entrance to the basement tunnel. This seemed to work as the activity began to die down. The activity reduced so much that Carl felt comfortable moving into the club as a caretaker, turning the upstairs office into an apartment. But this would not last. After a few months of peace, Carl encountered what he only described as a horrid creature, which pointed at him and demanded that he get out. This time, Carl was not spared physically, as he was supposedly hauled into the air and slammed into the ground. Carl repeated his trip to the church, but upon his return, he encountered the creature near the stage. He stared at the thing, transfixed, and then realized that he was floating about 5 to 6 feet above the ground. He claims that when he truly came to, the entity had possessed him, forcing him to throw the bottle of holy water as far as he could from the back door. After this, Carl's behavior became so erratic and volatile that even though Bobby himself didn't believe in possession, he knew he needed to do something to calm people down. Bobby finally contacted a minister who deemed an exorcism necessary. On a warm summer evening in August 1991, Reverend Cole began the exorcism. Multiple predictable exchanges transpired. Carl got down on all fours and growled at the Reverend. The sound of 1,000 voices came from Carl's throat. After 6 hours of this, Carl went limp, then jumped into the Reverend's arms, declaring, "It's over. They're gone." Carl seemed to be a magnet to the building's supernatural forces. Carl was standing near the bar when the spirit of a girl with short blonde hair appeared. She told him, "My name is Pearl. I need your help." When he asked what kind of help she needed, what was described as evil laughter echoed around the room before Carl was punched in the jaw and ribs so hard that it rendered him unconscious. Carl began to wake back up, seeing an apparition behind the bar. He became fully alert when a few loud gunshots rang out in the empty casino room. He hurried to the bar to retrieve some holy water that he'd by now decided to keep near him at all times, but was startled by more gunshots from the main entrance. When he investigated, he found only a cactus decoration in the area. As he drew closer to the plant, the cactus split apart, spilling out thousands of spiders, which crawled up Carl. Carl sprinted out the door, all the way down to the Licking River, and jumped in. Once he had clambered out, he inspected his clothes, but found no spiders. Likewise, when he returned inside, the cactus was completely intact. And it's now that we come to the other keystone legend of Bobby Mackey's, Joanna. Carl Lawson claims that an apparition told him to go to the basement and dig at the tunnel. There he found a few pieces of paper reading, "My name is Joanna, and I beg you to help me. I'm a prisoner in hell. Search the spotlight room." Carl dutifully climbed up the ladder behind the stage and broke the small padlock to the door that would open onto the catwalk. In the spotlight room, he found several artifacts, including a journal and an inscription on the wall. Now, our tour group wasn't permitted to see this area of the building, as Carl's apartments and the upper rooms in general have been deemed unsafe by the fire department. But supposedly, the inscription can still be seen on the wall to this day, believed to be Joanna's suicide note. Quote, "My love is deep as the sea that flows forever. You ask me when will it end, I tell you never. My love is as bright as the sun that shines forever. You ask me when will it end, I tell you never. The world may disappear like a castle of sand, but I'll be waiting here with my heart in my hand. My love, I love you so much, now and forever. You ask me when will it die, I tell you never. My heart cries out from hell, I will be waiting here. My love is, I tell you never." The journal Carl found supposedly belonged to Joanna Jewell, presumably a stage name, who was a dancer at the Latin Quarter. Her journal reads, quote, "Today's Tuesday. My father and I have had another argument. He told me to stay away from Robert. He said this will be his final warning. I don't know what I'm going to do. He said he would kill him. I would rather be dead than be without Robert. It's after 7 in the evening and I'm sick to my stomach. I've been vomiting every day for at least a week. I know what's wrong with me. I'm pregnant with Robert's child. If my father finds out, he'll kill me. Robert and I are going to sneak off together soon. We're going to Chicago, where Robert has a friend who is a talent agent. He is going to get Robert a job singing in an all-night cabaret and help him pursue his singing career. We are going to get a small flat, and Robert is going to sing 6 nights a week. I don't want to keep dancing as a chorus girl. I need to find an easier job. Being pregnant, I won't take any chances. We have to be careful not to let my father know where we're going. He would hunt us down and kill both of us. He's insane. My father would do anything to keep me from Robert. He said that Robert Randall was a no-count bum. He always calls him by his full name. I call him by the pet name I gave him, Robbie. He laughs at me when I do this. We love each other so much." It's Friday now. Robbie and I are going to sneak off after he sings his last song tonight. I have everything packed for our trip. I can't wait to get out of here. I want to get as far away from my father as possible. I can't believe the day has finally come for me to escape his cruelty. It's noted that the next couple of pages are warped from Joanna's tears. Quote, "I went to Robbie's dressing room and knocked over and over. No one answered. So I turned the doorknob and walked inside. He wasn't there. The blue shirt he had been wearing was on the floor, ripped all the way up the back. It was covered in blood. I know my father killed Robbie. He'll rot in hell for doing this. I don't know what to do. We were getting out of here. I'll never leave now. I'll kill my father and myself. I don't have a life without Robbie. This child inside me has no future without her daddy. I know it's a girl. I'm going to kill my father. He's a rotten paid killer. He and Red have shot 3 or 4 men that I know of. They killed Tony in here 2 weeks ago over a lousy gambling debt. They took Tony's body down to the basement and carried him through the tunnel to the river. They don't think I know about the tunnel. They use it to bring illegal moonshine into this place. They think everyone is stupid. They get their bootleg whiskey sent here by boat up the Licking River. I can't believe they haven't been caught all the times they've docked the boat and carried off stuff through the tunnel. Well, I'll see they get caught now. I'm going to write a letter to the government and tell them about the secret tunnel these fine, upstanding men use at night. I'm going to tell them about the dead men they hauled to the middle of the Ohio River and dumped overboard. I think they have buried some bodies in the basement. They filled in an old cistern with concrete instead of just covering it over. I wish Buck was still here. He was a kind man. My father had Red run him off. They forced him to sell this place to their boss. They would have killed him if he had continued refusing their demands. If I knew where Buck was, I would tell him everything I know about my father and his friends. I heard Buck tell my father he would return here someday and get revenge. Buck swore this place would never thrive as a gambling casino again. If there is justice, he'll return, and I sure hope he does. I'm going to take poison and leave this life after I poison my father. If there is life after death, I'll walk this place until my Robert returns for me. After a few blank pages, there is a final entry. Quote, "It's Sunday now. I don't have much time to write this down. I did it. I poisoned my father. I sat at the kitchen table and watched him pour 3 cups of coffee. He drank every drop. He always drinks 4 or 5 cups in the morning. I drank a cup with him. We are both doomed. The poison is working on me. I can barely see to write this down. My eyes are blurred. I waited until he fell to the floor. I told him I poisoned him and he was going to rot in hell. He laughed and told me he had sold his soul to the devil and he would be here forever. He said he would control me in death as he has in life. He told me that the well was used as a gateway to and from hell. I didn't understand what he was talking about. He said the well was a tunnel. He told me they found a sealed-up well and climbed to the bottom of it. It was used to drain animals' blood into the river when the place was a slaughterhouse years ago. He and his friends dug from the bottom of the well towards the river, reopening the tunnel. He laughed at me and said he would return from hell. He said he would keep Robert from me for all eternity. He said the devil appeared to him in the well and he sold his soul for immortality. He will use the well to come back here. He told me his friends would cover up our deaths just like they've done before. No one will ever know we existed. He told me the well and the Licking River were used for satanic ceremonies because it flows north just like the Nile River. As my father lay on the floor dying, the spirit came out of him and identified himself as Alonzo Walling. He mocked me, saying it was he who entered my father's body and took control of him, making my father kill Robbie. The spirit laughed and told me he and his friend were hung for killing and beheading a girl named Pearl. The spirit of Alonzo said he would make all pregnant women who entered this place pay with their lives. He said it was his pal, Scott, who actually killed the girl, but he too was hung for the crime, and because of that, all pregnant women would suffer his wrath. He said Pearl's head was buried deep down in the well, and that it was a blood sacrifice to Lucifer. I'm going down to the basement and pray over the tunnel in hopes that I can block the evil from coming here again. To whoever finds this book, please find a way to seal the well and keep my father and his friends in hell. You are my only hope. If my prayers don't work, I'll be his prisoner forever, and many more people will suffer their evil weather. I'll never be with Robert again if you ignore this. My father should be dead by now. My body is trembling from the poison. My mouth is so dry. I don't have much time left. It's funny, I thought I felt my baby move. It's raining outside. I can hear raindrops beating against the roof. I'm going to the basement and do what I can to stop my father and his evil. I'm taking the cover of this book and a few pages with me. If you have found this part of my diary, look in the basement for the other half. I'll try to write down what happens if I can. I'm looking at the words I just wrote on the wall. Please, Robert, come back for me. The words make me want to cry. I have to go now or I won't have the strength to walk to the basement. I can't wait any longer. Please help me. I need your help. My love is powerful. I'll find a way to come back and be with Robbie if you, whoever you are, will only help me. Please, I beg of you to help me. If I fail, you must seal the well. Here's the thing. The journal was ultimately destroyed in a fire. So the only record we have of this journal is a transcription written by Carl Lawson. So now we need to address the elephant in the room, Carl Lawson himself. The truth, from what we know for sure, is that Carl was the witness or victim of the majority of Bobby Mackey's supernatural encounters, and that his reports grew more and more fantastic with fewer and fewer fellow witnesses. Multiple parts of his claims don't add up either. He says that his spirit identified itself as Pearl, but he said that she had short blonde hair. This is a huge discrepancy as the report from the murder describes long red hair. Carl was the only one to find the notes in the basement, the only one to even see the journal from what I can find. The only record that we have of the journal is of his own written transcript, the contents of that journal are equally suspect. One of the authors of the books I read noted that the entire last entry asks us to believe that a fatally poisoned person is able to write out an incredibly long and detailed entry as she took her last breaths. If this was true, I myself am unsure of the logistics of the various papers and wall writing. She wrote her suicide note upstairs before descending to bury the papers, as one source claims her deceased body was found in the basement. But then we would also need to believe that none of this was discovered for a few decades. I never met Carl. I never spoke to him. From all of the sources I've read, Carl seems to be at his best when he's needed. Most of the experiences with Janet and Carl involve Carl saving her. The first sighting of Joanna that I can find was by Carl. Joanna only showed herself to him. She chose him to be worthy of finding her final words. Even the end of Joanna's journal entry has a damsel in distress begging this future hero who would hopefully find her last testament and save her soul. He also continued to live in the building where he was supposedly physically thrown multiple times, as well as possessed. I understand that sometimes circumstance can prevent moving residences quickly, but this is just another odd situation on top of all of the others. I can't tell you how much of his experiences were true, or even if he believed in every part of those stories. But you have to admit, this is a lot we're being asked to believe, all coming from one person. Either way, these stories have been etched into the very bones of Bobby Mackey's, even going so far as to there being several sightings of Carl's spirit on the premises. A shrine to Carl can be found in the pool room to this day, a testament to how many people counted him as a friend. Whether he's still roaming the bar or not, I truly hope that he finds peace. The bar at 44 Licking Pike, Wilder, Kentucky, has undergone documented explorations for at least a dozen television programs, as well as countless investigations by local and far-traveling groups. There are quite a few books about the place, some openly fictional and some looking to document what facts can be pinned down. We've gone all the way back to a time before Kentucky was a state in an attempt to track the history that may have given rise to ghostly sightings. So now it's time to cover all of the unexplained phenomena currently recorded, be it from visitors, ghost hunters, or even a court case. In the 1980s, Steve Sater was the first responder to a car accident in front of the club. As he was dealing with the accident, the club doors slammed open. A woman in a full-length gown and light-colored hair carrying red tablecloths ran out of the entryway into the scene. The accident must have been quite serious, as the tablecloths were to throw over the bodies. This severity is confirmed as, unfortunately, a man and a woman died in the crash. A tragic story, but not yet strange or mysterious. That is, until Steve Sater went to the bar to thank the woman, only to find Bobby Mackey's doors closed and locked. When Steve informed the club owner of the woman's existence, Bobby responded that there was no one in the club at the time and that they had no employees matching that description. Arguments over the validity of the hauntings began to make it into major media more frequently. In 1992, an episode of The Geraldo Show saw the host argue against the satanic cult rumors on the grounds that there is no historic evidence to back it up, that we know the original purpose of the tunnels, and that there was nothing nefarious about the use of those tunnels. A bishop named Long disagrees with this general perspective, as he had performed an exorcism at Bobby Mackey's on the first episode of Ghost Adventures in 2008. He believes that just the presence of residual negative energy could be enough to attract demonic entities. I'm not personally convinced by this rather weak argument, as we could then simply say this about any location, having to pursue no further evidence. And if this was all it took to riddle a building with spirits, I can think of many more mundane places that would do more than fulfill that requirement. Bishop Long also claimed that some recordings from Ghost Adventures were deemed too sensitive to use in the episode. He said that something attached itself to one of the Ghost Adventures crew, and that it played a, quote, major role in ending his marriage. Jumping back to 1993 this time, we come to the most dramatic and public incident that brought the nightclub screeching into the spotlight. but not for the reasons Bobby may have wanted. J.R. Costigan claims that he was challenging the ghosts to show themselves while he was in the bathroom. Supposedly, a dark-haired man with a rope around his neck appeared, punched Costigan in the face, kicked him while he was down, and disappeared. You would have thought that such a solid encounter with a being of the afterlife would have thrilled Costigan. Not so. He attempted to hold Bobby Mackey accountable in court to the tune of $1,000 with the reasoning that there were no signs posted in the club warning patrons of just how violent these spirits could be. The defense responded with what can be described as a poem. One portion read, quote, "The plaintiff can always pursue his tort upon his death in a higher court." One can only imagine what the judge was thinking when presented with such a ridiculous exchange. Fortunately, there was an element that made the decision easy to hand down without declaring whether the court believed in the supernatural or not. The attack had occurred over a year before the lawsuit, and therefore the statute of limitations had expired. The judge also declared that, in any case, Bobby Mackey could hardly be expected to control the actions of the dead. The case concluded with the judge reprimanding both parties for wasting everyone's time. The effects of this case can still be seen today, as a sign now hangs at the front entrance reading, quote, "Warning to our patrons. This establishment is purported to be haunted. Management is not responsible and cannot be held liable for any actions of any ghosts/spirits on this premises." There are numerous smaller reports that we can discuss. In general, many see people dressed in turn-of-the-century clothing. 2 men with cowboy hats and nooses around their necks, which was seen by the Ghost Adventures crew, and a headless woman, potentially fueled by the Pearl Bryan murder and legend. Due to there being so many stories, it might be best to describe the sightings like the guided tour does, by moving through the building room by room. I also have the benefit of being able to add in my experiences, since I went on a tour and visited the location multiple times. When you walk into the main entrance, you enter via a hallway lined with mirrors at torso height. As I looked into the mirrors, our guide named Alex with Gateway Paranormal saw what was holding me up. He leaned into the hallway and told me conspiratorially that they've heard from a few people that, as they're leaving the building, they glance to the side, distracted by the reflection, and have caught sight of girls from the Latin Quarter doing last-minute hair and makeup touch-ups. You then walk into the main bar area that stretches to your right. As a kid watching ghost shows, this area in the basement were what I was most familiar with. I was shocked when I walked through the next doorway and saw just how large the space is. The entire area feels like a ballroom that's now taken up by dozens of tables and chairs for patrons. The area just behind the bar used to be the kitchen, the same kitchen where Carl had his exorcism. But it was taken out, opening up the space even more. I think that because every ghost hunting show takes place in near total darkness, that this is why I had never gotten a true grasp on how big the main spaces are. Slowly turning in the center of the room, I could now much more easily understand how people could see things in the shadows at the other end of the room. A few long windows allow very little light from street lamps into one end of the dining area. A huge shadowy stage, numerous gaping dark doorways. Even if I had never known of the building's lore, I'd be uneasy simply from the sheer size of its opening darkness. I returned later during business hours to see how it felt when not catering to ghost tours. I was surprised to find that it was almost as dark as when it was closed. The main bar and small merchandise area were the only well-lit parts of the building. The rest of the space was only lit by occasional colored lights and was still very shadowy. Those few long windows I mentioned were very foggy, barely letting in any light from the bright summer day outside. Back to the tour, we walked up to the dance floor, looking up at the dark stage, the bar's name visible only by the faintest of stage lights. Dark doorways flanked either side of the stage, making me a little uneasy. The guide gestured at the stage, quote, "Up on the stage here is where people will actually take pictures, and they will catch a woman's face." He then turned to a doorway saying, quote, "Actually, we've had where we've seen a man's head peeking out of the doorway over there." Facing the stage, we turned right, walked through that doorway, and then entered into what some call the bull room. As the name suggests, there's a giant mechanical bowl in the center and a few pool tables at the very back wall. In this room, a woman named Donna Clifton was taking lunch to her partner at the time who was working on equipment. She walked into the silent bar, but as soon as she entered the ballroom, the anniversary waltz began to play. She made her way to the jukebox, but it was unplugged, and, what's more, the anniversary waltz record wasn't even in the jukebox. When our group walked into the ballroom, the guide directed us to the corner with the pool tables that he affectionately called the creepy corner. Now remember towards the beginning of the first episode that I had mentioned that the land along the Licking River was nicknamed Gallows Gap due to there being so many illegal lynchings. Well, our tour guide said that one of those hanging trees stood right where the corner of the building is now. The Gatekeeper Paranormal team theorizes that this helps to account for so much activity in that room, including thrown bottles. I have no way to verify the location of this tree, but it's a great story in theory. Alex did multiple EVP readings throughout the night, but starting with the ballroom, we repeatedly heard the number 7 very clearly. Now what that could mean, I have no idea. We walked into a small room that contains an old safe from the mob days. The words, specifically for C.A. Brady, still eligible on the side. This room had been under constant watch by hired men wielding shotguns. These days, the room is decorated with frames containing photographs, artwork, and jerseys. But there is also a disco ball on the roof that's been there for God knows how long. We've only got another whispered 7 from the EVP, but it was damn creepy to hear while looking out of the only door to the shadowy stage. The last place to go from the main floor was the Spotlight Room and Carl's apartments. I was very much looking forward to this, as Joanna's suicide note was found in the Spotlight Room, and Carl reported many incidences that had occurred up in his rooms. The third episode of Portals to Hell included a tour by one of Gatekeeper Paranormal's leads, Laura. When they went up to Carl's apartment, she walked over to a bathtub now full of dirt and plaster. Apparently, it was in this very tub that Carl claims that a demon attempted to hold him underwater to drown him. He would barricade the main door every night, the door with the words "Get Out" on the outside, in case any spirits cared to read the request, and slept with a shotgun, as he frequently heard hundreds of footsteps walking around the empty bar below. You can, therefore, imagine my disappointment when Alex informed us that the fire department recently forbade any further ventures into Carl's apartment or the Spotlight Room. I was slightly pacified when we all started to move towards the front door in order to get to the most active part of the building, the basement. When the basement door opens, we're greeted with a seemingly endless void. The beams of the small flashlights we brought don't break up the darkness as much as we'd hoped. Multiple open rooms on both the left and the right are blocked off, as the crumbling concrete floors have multiple holes and pose a tripping hazard. Also, the walls and beams don't exactly inspire confidence in the area's safety. To the right, you can see the trapdoor stairs as they climb up to the men's bathroom floor. At the end of the long, wide chamber, there are several changing room stalls constructed in the basement separate from any rooms. Directly across from these changing rooms is a hodgepodge of storage. Alex laughed as he recounted a woman he'd given a tour to. She had approached with a camera, a little shaky, but excitedly telling him that she may have captured a ghost. When he was shown the photo, Alex was shocked at how distinct the facial features were in the darkness, but that the face was also strangely familiar. He walked her back to the storage area and pointed to an antique video game with a 3-dimensional boxer sticking out of the display. They laughed when she sheepishly admitted that her captured face and the boxer shared some remarkable similarities. Walking into the dark, our lights reflected off of used bottles stacked in overflowing barrels. A guide named Ray had been leading a tour when they all heard the sound of something heavy being dragged. When everyone ran out, they found one of these full barrels was now in the middle of the corridor. I couldn't help but remember a very different use of very similar barrels in this same basement. Seemingly, this direction of thought was shared by others. The guide pointed along the wall and said, quote, "There's a manhole over there, and inside of that manhole is a metal chair. Supposedly, what they used to do back in the Mafia days is they would put him in the chair, and they would cover him with the manhole, and they would wait for the river to rise." Whether this new bit of information is true or not, I shuddered a little. Certainly not the way I would want to go. The most intriguing part of the basement is that if you walk halfway down the main chamber and look to the right, you'll be looking through the window of what is left of the Pop House. In the basement of Bobby Mackey's sits one room of the turn-of-the-century house, complete with faded, peeling wallpaper, though some of the paper had been there for so long that it looks as if it's been petrified to the walls. In this room is the bottom of the trapdoor stairs and the portal to hell. But we aren't quite there yet. First, we walk over to the dressing rooms. They're quite small, very similar to the temporary fitting rooms that you'd find in the center of a large department store. A few vases of roses sit before a long mirror sporting smeared fingerprints, the countertop itself covered in coins, cigarettes, and dust, the prior two acting as tributes to Joanna. We all pile into one of these dressing rooms so that Alex can tell us of the events that had happened there. Quote, "We've had somebody take a picture, actually facing in, and they caught a shadow that looks like it's leaning over, looking in the mirror, brushing its hair." Conversation turns to the dancers who utilize the basement to change, so Alex finally tells the group about Joanna. Quote, "So, like I said, Joanna was a dancer here. Her father ran the Latin Quarter supposedly. We can neither confirm nor deny. So a lot of stuff that'll actually happen here is chairs will move. Hair tends to get played with. People will take pictures in the mirror and they'll catch different pictures of apparitions. One person actually caught an apparition of a man hanging from the rafters, which is how they believe Robert Randall was killed. Now, I've had somebody in here and they've actually taken a picture of me when I first started here, and I was leaning in the doorway just like this, and Marky Mark's standing here and he's teaching me the ropes, you know. Someone took a picture, and standing next to me just like this is a man with his arm around me, and you could see from the neck down. He was wearing a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and boots. Filing out of the dressing room, we walk back towards the Pop House. There's a doorway which acts as a transition to the Pop House, but also to the Room of Faces. As soon as you walk in, you see shelves of children's toys, many of which have been used as trigger objects in investigations. A square table hosts a beat-up candelabra and a few wooden toys. The room is long, with a line of old chairs lining one wall, almost looking like there should be a projection or a screen on the opposite wall. It's not a screen that visitors study intently, but the wall itself. The wall is modeled with various grays, as decades had changed the wall's original gray stone. I had read that some believe that the mob would line victims up along the wall and shoot them there. People claim to see faces in the wall, and Alex points out a lumpy shape that visiting psychics have declared is the lounging form of Joanna. Alternatively, a few visiting psychics say that these faces are the faces of those who have died on the premises. One story that I've heard passed around is that a guide, one source saying that it was a man named Rick, was with a group in the Room of Faces. Rick told the group that many women, particularly pregnant women, feel uneasy and nauseous in this room, that, quote, "bad things tend to happen to pregnant women after they visit the room." One of the women in the group naturally exclaimed that she was pregnant, she and the group chuckling a little. I'm sure you can see where this is going. According to the story, one of the girl's friends returned to give the sad news to the team that the poor girl had suffered a miscarriage. Personally, the Room of Faces inspired no fear for me. I had been looking forward to seeing this room, to see just how defined the faces were. As someone who had grown up in a house that was over 100 years old, this wall looked exactly like my parents' basement. After examining the room myself, I believe this room is an almost textbook example of facial pareidolia. Facial pareidolia is when our brain naturally studies objects for emotional expression in the same way that we study human faces. This is hypothesized to be due to the evolved need to quickly tell friend from foe by studying another for negative reactions. Due to the speed of this study, what can be described as the brain's face template can be triggered by anything that vaguely fulfills this search. This phenomena is frequently attributed to the faces on Mars images that were taken back in 1976. Even Alex joked that he always thought one of the forms on the wall looked like an alien, and that he wasn't exactly sure when an alien lost its life in the building. All of that being said, the point at the end of the day is that people come to Bobby Mackey's looking for stories, and this is a natural way to find them. Honestly, I was far more creeped out by the transition room that we had just come through. The opposite doorway opened to the pitch-black main chamber, which would occasionally emit unexplained noises. It was finally time to enter what was left of the pop house, and to encounter the one-way ticket to Demon Central. When you enter the room, you're immediately greeted with the dark trapdoor stairway. Alex told us that quite a few people had seen shadow figures, orbs, mists, and heard footsteps, all connected to those stairs. In particular, the footsteps would be heard coming down the stairs, but the footsteps would stop at the threshold with no one visible. I approached the doorway, looked up the very old stairs, and confirmed that it was indeed very creepy. In the back was a crumbling room so small that it was really more of an alcove. A single chair had been placed in the center, seemingly waiting for us. This closet-sized room was used as a jail cell for the mob. Sometimes it was someone who'd gotten drunk enough to cause trouble and was placed there to wait for someone to come get them. Sometimes it was some poor soul who'd been caught cheating in the casino upstairs. I don't think I have to tell you why it wasn't a good thing to cheat in an establishment run by the mob. My friend who had come with me entered the cell, sat in the chair, looked around for a minute, then looked up at me and said, "Oh no, I do not like it in here." When she hopped out of the chair, I walked inside and turned around towards the entrance. I understood what my friend meant. It didn't feel great. You had a clear view to the portal to hell, directly over it being an empty window frame, and then you gaze out into the void of the main chamber. Not a comfortable view. The portal itself was incredibly underwhelming, at least visually. It looked like someone had slipped while using a jackhammer, busted a chunk out of the floor, and then decided to dig around a little. Alex informed us that the well descended 14 feet, but had been capped off for safety reasons and to prevent the occasional flooding from the Licking River. In the first episode of Ghost Adventures, the crew had clambered down the forested bank of the Licking River to find the other end of the tunnel. They had to walk bent over to enter, finally coming to a muddy chamber, the ceiling of which was the basement floor of Bobby Mackey's. After much consideration, while watching the crew struggle through that tunnel, I decided that if the tunnel looked that iffy about 15 years ago, then it's probably not any safer today. In the Portals to Hell episode, Guide Laura reported growling being heard frequently near the portal, as well as a stranger, more corporeal concern. A young man had climbed over the simple wooden railing and sat down next to the well. He took out a Ouija board that he had brought with him and placed it almost directly on the well, before slicing his hand open and smearing his blood on the Ouija board in an attempt to summon something out of hell. On the same episode, a medium named Cindy Kaza practiced automatic writing, or spirit writing, which is when a person with psychic abilities records words directly from spirits without influencing it consciously. Cindy determined that the building had collected spirits from the local area, that multiple portals were created when the ground broke. Now, there was a time when Bobby Mackey was planning to expand. When he attempted to do this, the ground did split, and it stopped the construction plans. Whether or not this created portals or released spirits is up for debate. We wrapped up our honestly very fun and pleasant tour without any physical supernatural events and headed home. Despite many people saying that evil spirits followed them home, myself and the 3 friends who attended with me have suffered no ill effects. But I still wasn't quite done. I had reached out to several paranormal groups in the nearby area who had investigated Bobby Mackey's and asked if anyone wanted to talk about it. Stephen Egolf is an investigator with the Tri-C Ghost Hunters, who kindly agreed to indulge my questions. The first few moments of the interview quickly revealed that we had both gotten into exploring this topic via early interest in cryptids, spirits, and anything mysterious in general. His fascination began with the show In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy. Why do you think that investigating the paranormal goes beyond an interest? Why it's important to go explore these things?
Life is about learning. And the more you learn, the more you know. The more you know, the less arrogance. I mean, we think we're the most important things in the world. And we need to understand that we're not. And that's the thing about ghost hunting too, is you need to have a respect for the spirit that you're exploring and that you're investigating. Intelligent ones, they just want to be heard. It's a learning thing for me. I'm always trying to learn something new.
Where do you sit on the spectrum of belief? Are you inclined to believe everything, or are you at the other end where the supernatural doesn't exist?
I try to stay in between. What I like to say is, once you have exhausted everything that's possible, then the impossible becomes possible. If I've taken everything out of the equation, then whatever's left, that's something new. So I try not to be far to one side, oh, I'm a total skeptic, but I don't go the other way where I believe everything.
When it comes to Bobby Mackey's, what part of the lore do you believe?
I definitely believe that the caretaker, I do believe that he's sticking around. I don't know about the portal to hell, but there's definitely spirits there. There's no doubt in my mind. I believe there's some residual, and I believe there's some intelligence. When I was there, I didn't feel anything evil. I definitely felt stuff there.
What was your group's experiences when you investigated Bobby Mackey's?
Well, we had a group of about 10 of us, and it was actually mostly from our team, Tri-C. We decided to do a get-together, and this is what we were going to do. So we got there, and half went upstairs, half went downstairs. And my group started downstairs. Well, the first thing everybody wanted to hit was the portal to hell. Well, behind that are a couple of little cubbies. I let them go up there, and I sat in one of the cubbies and used the EVP. I like REM pods. Everybody's got their favorite equipment and stuff. I just sat in there and asked questions and, the typical stuff. The EVP did start going off. You know how you get a chill? Sometimes you get it just because you're creeped, but sometimes I'm calm, but why am I getting this? And I did start getting that. I didn't get anything real big on EVP. My REM pod went nuts in a few places. It did seem intelligent, but in there, I was asking, were you held in here against your will? Deep. And just asking questions like that. After that, we went down the way back towards the storage areas. We really didn't get any stories about it or anything, but there was just something about that area that made my hair rise.
Did you get anything in the bull room with the pool tables at the back wall?
I actually put a REM pod, and then I use cat toys that when they roll, they light up. And then I also put some pool balls up there and just made sure it was level and did that, but I just started asking questions. Is anybody here with me? REM pod was going off, and I was actually doing the yes and no thing. Hey, if you're a man, can you please beep? And it would beep. And then the cat toys started lighting up a little bit. The pool balls didn't roll, but that was, to me, one of the most active areas that I found was back by the pool tables.
Is there anything about this location that you don't think is looked at enough? Was there anything that you ask, why aren't we talking about this?
Like I said, except for like that corner and the DJ's booth, I am curious more about those. I don't understand why they don't talk about maybe even that corner a little more. I feel something happened near or around the DJ's booth and that, but other than that, not that I can really think of. I had my fair share of experience. This is one of the first places that I've gone to where it's one of the ones from TV that I got to really explore. And it really helped put it in perspective that, okay, there's a lot of TV, if you understand what I mean, in these shows.
Wrapping up on Bobby Mackey's in general, I wanted to ask Steven some questions about ghost hunting itself, common misconceptions, and what he'd like others to know about the profession. What is something about paranormal investigation that you'd like to be more understood? Ghost hunting definitely has some unfortunate aspects of its reputation, but what is something you think the community deserves more credit for?
I think people believe that investigators believe everything. Our group, Tri-C, we actually help people for free if they get a hold of us. And we will go investigate their home and we will see what's going on, even in the pre-interviews, because we'll do a pre-interview, we'll try to figure out what's going on, and then we'll see if we need to go out. But a lot of times we'll go and it's simple things like the electromagnetic is just going through the roof right near the head of their bed. We'll do things like that, but I think people think that we believe everything that's there. One of the things is I think we're not skeptics, but we have to be skeptical enough to rule out things. The stigma that we're always going to find something. And then the other thing is a lot of people think spirits are evil. They're not. From what I've seen, just want to tell a story.
What's the craziest thing to happen to you or one of your team on an investigation?
We have had a team member that has carried something home with them. So we did have that happen. The biggest thing for me is just, I had my shirt grabbed. As soon as I got over okay, what just happened? It was like, okay, that was really, really neat. Because it's physical, something you can feel. It's not just something, okay, did I really hear that? I know I felt my shirt get tugged. 2 minutes later, a fellow investigator, I'd say she was a good 2-3 feet from me. All of a sudden she said, did it just get cold in here? I just put my hand over in front of her and there was a drastic difference.
What's some advice for visitors of Bobby Mackey's, or to people curious about the paranormal in general?
Keep an open mind. I think being in the middle is the best place to be. If you believe everything, then you're going to see things that aren't there. And when you're in those creepy places, it's very easy to fool yourself. It's very easy to hear things that aren't there. A simple creak of a piece of wood, and you're like, oh, what was that?
We walked through the entryway to the main room, and I was going last because I was filming. Everyone walked forward, and I followed, but I heard a creak behind me. I turned around and walked the path again. There was a spot that creaked, but only when you were at the edge of the planking about 3 feet away. If I hadn't gone to check that out, it would have been easy to say it was paranormal. It's also why I didn't tell the friends anything about the location. I didn't want to make them look for specific things or to accidentally provide a bias.
See, I would rather go in blind. That gives more credence. And like I said, be respectful, just in general. Don't believe everything you hear. All these shows, just don't believe every little thing just because they saw it. And that's another thing people don't realize about investigations is you could have gone to Bobby Mackey's and had the best night of your life, gotten so much stuff. You could have gone there the next night expecting that and gotten nothing.
After another hour or so enthusiastically discussing our favorite locations and cases, we said farewell. And so ended my very pleasant first interview with a ghost hunter. Well, good God, we covered a ton of information. From present day all the way back to before Kentucky was even a state. Accidents, murders, hangings, mob hits, exorcisms, and more. I'm still reeling over the sheer amount of information as I record this. Though I'd originally shied away from covering such a popular location, I'm glad that I looked into it. I found so much information that I'd never heard before, and I hope you found it interesting. I've sprinkled my own thoughts throughout this, but I'll wrap up my conclusions here. Far more tragedies have happened in the area than I thought, quite a few being freak accidents. If you're even vaguely a spiritual person, you can agree that it doesn't make for a great atmosphere. When it comes to Pearl Bryan, I just feel sad. I don't think she was a sacrifice to Satan or part of any kind of ritual. None of the people involved had a history of ritualistic sacrifice or any similar patterns, or even rumors, that I could find, and it was never mentioned by those involved. I think she was a complicated problem for a cocky young man who, until then, had done whatever he wanted while dodging any accountability. I don't think her case is connected in any way to the building that is currently Bobby Mackey's. It makes far more sense to simply discard her head in the river, as several pieces of evidence had been disposed of, than to risk being caught sneaking into a functioning distillery with the most condemning piece of evidence I can think of. I definitely believe that some horrifying activity occurred while the Primrose and then the Latin Quarter were active. There are countless stories from many people, recorded court cases, and hell, even bullet holes still present in the basement. As far as Joanna, I have seen no compelling evidence that she even existed. The most I've heard is that someone found a police record of a Joanna dying from poisoning, but I have yet to see this report. On Portals to Hell, co-founder Laura also admitted that they found no historical evidence of her. When it comes to Carl, we simply have no evidence of his claims. We have quite a few wild stories, but stories with almost no other witnesses. I didn't know Carl, I'm not calling him a liar, but I can't confirm anything he claimed. I can't help but find it suspicious that we supposedly had physical evidence in the form of an extensive journal, which mysteriously burned up before anyone else could see it, leaving only Carl's transcript. And hell, maybe some of his claims were true, maybe some weren't, but we just don't know. In the present day, I personally never felt like my life was in danger. Someone I know had been going to the bar for after-work drinks for years with no ill effects or unwanted supernatural hitchhikers. Maybe the spirits weren't as active the night that I went. Maybe I'm just not interesting enough to haunt. Who knows? However, there are a lot of people who have experiences that seem to have truly terrified them. To those people, I hope that they're doing better and that their fear has dulled with time. I hope that they can avoid the bar and go on with their life. Because it would be terrifying to be thrown down the stairs or lifted off the ground, or any number of things reported to have occurred. When I think of Bobby Mackey's, I think of a deeply layered history that is perfect for mutation. The area is rife with ghost stories, even before the distilleries were built. The combination of having a slaughterhouse nearby, along with the existence of the distillery tunnel, could have quite easily become a narrative way to get rid of unwanted things such as distillery byproduct, blood, and even human remains. Pearl's murder shocked the area, creating an atmosphere of panic and paranoia. Demon worship has always been close to the surface of the human mind. A mind that has always so feared the unknown, when in reality, they should be far more concerned with the evil contained within the smiling young man beside them. The mob already had a terrifying legacy that so easily attached to the tunnel's ability to secret away dirty deeds. The mob's confirmed use of the building and tunnel may have sparked even more belief in the Slaughterhouse and Pearl Bryan theories, with its kernel of truth. The constant layering of these events continued to serve as confirmation of the next potentially evil occurrence. This was encouraged even more by the Hard Rock Cafe becoming known as the Bloody Bucket. It's impossible to ignore that violence just can't seem to stay away from the local area and building for decades. I'm glad that the establishment of Bobby Mackey's club has put a stop to such frequent violence, but even after his death, I feel concerned for Carl Lawson. To have been so connected to a place that you cleaned blood off of the floors after biker gang fights, and to have lived there because you cared so much about its entertainment legacy, living alone in a huge, dark, unsettling building by the dark woods and muddy river, that just can't be good for anyone. All in all, there's just such a big selection of horrible events that can easily be morphed or adjusted to suit whatever theory you can think of. Is it haunted? I don't know. There are so many reports, so many people that seem honestly, truly afraid, and such a crazy history that I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I'll be keeping myself open to any further discoveries or stories about the place, that's for sure. Is it a portal to hell? I don't really know if I'm qualified to decide. But if you'd like, you can always stop by one weekend for some drinks and music, go on a tour, and maybe even get an I Partied with the Ghosts at Bobby Mackey's t-shirt. You can always come decide for yourself, but just do me a favor. Don't cut yourself open on a Ouija board in an attempt to summon a demon. I hear they're a pain in the ass. Other than that, visit for the music or avoid like the plague, and see what you think about the ghosts of Bobby Mackey's music world. The first season is officially complete. This has been a project in development since winter of 2020, with quite a few bumps and false starts along the way. A lot of things have evolved in that time. I'm even more grateful for public libraries than I was before. I found that spooky rumors and legends can be quite personal to the communities that they come from. Many of these stories have roots with people who weren't permitted to speak for themselves. In the future, I hope to find more historians, professionals, or community leaders to speak for their own cultures. I spoke with many different kinds of people, all with a wide variety of beliefs when it comes to the afterlife or the unknown. While many in the general public view these topics as dark or depressing, I actually found a lot of hope and respect amongst the people with these interests. There's an openness that can be found among those who are willing to believe, who are eager to explore, and who are kind enough to share their own experiences. This show is a work in progress, and that's okay. Building this show by myself, learning a variety of digital programs to accomplish this, working past my own nervousness to put my opinions and passions out there, I was blown away by the amount of people who have been incredibly supportive and interested. I was able to send postcard flyers to shops across the country, to friends in different states who are willing to spread word of this project. So what can you expect from this show going forward? Well, I'll be working on releasing the videos for these episodes when I can. I've already started itching to delve into other locations and topics for Season 2. I might drop a minisode or a short here and there, but the best way for you to stay in the loop is by following the Back Away Slowly podcast's social media accounts. You can also contact me via the main site if you have suggestions. And again, thank you for giving this first season a chance. I have a long list of places and ideas, so please keep an ear out for Season 2 of Back Away Slowly.